You're standing in your kitchen right now, staring at a power bill that's climbed again, wondering where on earth the money went. Same food, same house, same habits, but somehow it costs more every single year. I felt that exact same sting. And then I found out something that made me feel like a fool. Everything you've been told about saving money in your own home is backwards. The modern, convenient, plugged-in way we were all taught to trust is the expensive way. The old Australian households ran on methods that cost almost nothing, and they worked better than what you're paying for today. I learned this from old country folk who never forgot. And there's a document out of Coolgardie, Western Australia, from the 1890s that proves the biggest secret of the lot. Stay with me, because you can use every bit of this in an ordinary suburban house tonight. No land, no tradesman, no special gear. I remember the day it clicked. I was sitting in a tin shed outside Dubbo with a bloke named Keith, 81 years old, and he handed me a glass of cold water that had never seen a fridge. I asked him how. He just smiled and said, "Son, we've forgotten more than we ever learned." That sentence has haunted me ever since. So let me start with the one that cost me the most, because it's the one that made me angry. For most of my life, I believed that keeping food fresh meant one thing: electricity. A big humming box in the corner, running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, whether it was full or empty. I never questioned it. Nobody does. That fridge is the single most expensive appliance in most Australian homes, quietly eating between $80 and $160 of power every year, and for the second fridge in the garage, double it. But here's the contradiction that stopped me cold. My grandmother raised 6 children through the Depression in a house with no refrigerator at all, not a small one, none, and nobody got sick. The milk didn't turn, the butter didn't go rancid, the meat kept. So either my grandmother was performing miracles or we've been sold a story. She wasn't performing miracles. She knew things. And those things got buried deliberately under a wave of shiny new appliances that somebody very much wanted us to buy. I'll get to exactly how she did it, because that's the big one, and I promised you a document to prove it. But first I need to show you how deep this goes, because refrigeration is just one thread. Once I pulled it, the whole jumper came apart. Let me tell you about the cleaning cupboard, because I reckon this one's robbing you blind right now, today, without you even noticing. Walk into your laundry and count the bottles. Go on. Spray for the kitchen. Spray for the bathroom. Spray for the glass. Spray for the floors. Cream for the bench. A different cream for the stovetop. Something blue, something green. Something that smells like a chemical version of a lemon. The average Australian household spends somewhere between $300 and $450 a year on cleaning products. Every year, forever. Now, here's what I found out, and it made me want to tip the whole cupboard in the bin. Before the 1950s, none of those bottles existed, not one, and the houses were spotless. My mother's generation, and her mother before her, kept a home clean enough to eat off the floor with 3 things: white vinegar, bicarbonate of soda, and a bar of plain soap. That was the arsenal. That was the whole war chest. The Country Women's Association, founded in 1922, printed handbooks that went out to thousands of homes across the bush, and those handbooks laid it out plain. Vinegar cuts grease and lime scale because it's a mild acid. Bicarb soda scrubs and deodorizes because it's a gentle abrasive that neutralizes smells instead of covering them. Put the two together and you get a fizzing reaction that lifts grime out of drains and off tiles. They knew the chemistry before the marketing men ever got hold of it. I tried it myself because I didn't believe it. I'm a skeptic by nature. I mixed white vinegar with a bit of water and an old spray bottle, half and half, and I went at the shower screen that 3 different expensive sprays had failed to clean. 10 minutes. Gone. The soap scum, the watermarks, the lot. A bottle of white vinegar costs about $2 and does the work of $40 worth of branded spray. Here's where the anger set in for me. Because this isn't an accident. Somebody worked out, decades ago, that they couldn't make much money selling you vinegar and bicarb since you can buy a lifetime supply for the price of a single fancy cleaning kit. So they invented problems. A different bottle for every surface, a different smell for every room. They turned a 2-ingredient solution into a 40-product habit, and they trained us to feel like we weren't cleaning properly unless we were spending. Groceries, the weekly shop, the thing that's gone up more than anything else in the last few years, until a trolley that used to cost $100 now costs $180, and you're carrying fewer bags to the car. I always believed that fresh was best and that fresh meant buying little and often. Pop to the shop every couple of days, grab what you need, keep it fresh. That's the modern way. That's what the convenience of a supermarket on every corner trained into us, and it is the single most expensive way to feed yourself ever devised. Here's what the old-timers knew. Every trip to the shop is a trap. You never walk out with just the bread and milk you came for. There's the stuff at the end of the aisle, the special that isn't really a special, the thing your eye lands on. Retailers have known since at least the 1960s, when the big self-serve supermarkets took over, that the longer you're in the store and the more often you come in, the more you spend on things you never planned to buy. Frequency is the profit. Your convenience is their business model. The Bush families couldn't shop little and often. The nearest town was half a day away by cart, so they provisioned. Once a month, once a season, they'd lay in the staples in bulk. Flour, sugar, salt, oats, dried peas, tea, and they stored it properly so it lasted. They planned meals around what they had, not around what they fancied walking past a shelf. I started doing it. I worked out the 10 things my household actually eats, week in, week out, and I started buying those in the biggest sensible quantity, once a month, and nothing else on impulse. My grocery bill dropped by nearly a third in the first 2 months. A third. That's real money, straight back in your pocket, from doing nothing more than shopping the way your great-grandmother had to. And bread. Let me talk about bread for a second, because this one still makes me shake my head. A loaf of decent bread now costs between $4 and $6. My grandmother baked her own for the price of the flour, a few cents a loaf, and it was better bread. But I can already hear you. I haven't got time to bake bread. Neither did she, with 6 kids. She made what they called a damper, and I'll come back to that, because it takes about 4 minutes of actual work. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now. You're thinking this is all very nice for people with a big pantry and a bit of land and a shed to store things in. You're sitting in a unit or a small place, maybe renting, and you're thinking, this bloke doesn't live in my world. So this next part is for you specifically, because I lived in a small place too, and everything I'm about to tell you works in a 1-bedroom flat with no yard and no permission from a landlord. Let's start with the power, because that's the one that's crushing everybody right now, regardless of the size of your home. You've been told that heating and cooling a home means running the reverse cycle unit, and that the bill is just the price of being comfortable. That's what I believed. My winter power bills used to genuinely frighten me. Then an old fella who'd grown up in a Queenslander showed me that most of the money isn't heating the air, it's leaking out the gaps. Here's the thing nobody tells you. In an average older Australian home, the equivalent of a wide-open window's worth of air is escaping all the time, through the gaps under doors, around window frames, through the chimney, through the vents. You are paying to heat the air, and that heated air is walking straight out the gaps, while cold air pours in to replace it. You're heating the whole street. The old solution costs almost nothing, and you can do it tonight in a rented flat. They called it a draft snake, or a door sausage, a tube of fabric filled with sand or rice, or even scrunched up plastic bags, laid along the bottom of the door. My grandmother had one against every external door and one against the door to any room she wasn't using, because the other secret is this: they didn't heat the house. They heated the room they were in, and they shut the door on the rest. We've been taught to heat 5 empty rooms so that one room feels nice. That's madness. And it's expensive madness. Do just those 2 things. Block the gaps and shut the doors on the rooms you're not using. In a small flat, you might knock 20–30% off your heating bill without buying a single new appliance. That's the old way. Heat the person, not the postcode. And here's another one for the small home crowd. And this is where I started to realize something bigger was going on. Your hot water. It's the second biggest energy cost in most homes after heating and cooling, and you've been trained to keep a tank of water piping hot around the clock, ready for the moment you might want it. But the old households heated water when they needed it, and not a second before. They understood that keeping 40 or 50 liters of water at scalding temperature all night, while everyone's asleep and nobody's using a drop, is like leaving the engine of your car running in the driveway all night just in case you fancy a drive at 3 in the morning. And that pattern, once you see it, changes everything about the way you walk through your own home. I spent a long time piecing all of this together, room by room, bill by bill, and eventually I put the whole thing down in writing so none of it would get lost again. If you want the complete picture in one place, I've written it up across 3 guides: Aussie Basics, Deep Thrift, and the full system, and you can find them linked in the description below. They cover everything from the cleaning cupboard to the power bill to the food in the kind of detail you can actually act on tonight. Thousands of Australian households have already started working through them, and the feedback I keep getting is the same thing. I wish someone had shown me this 20 years ago. But let's get back to the thread, because the pattern goes deeper than the cleaning cupboard, and the next one hits you every single week. Now, I want to pull all of this together, because by now you might be feeling what I felt. A slow, creeping realization that this isn't a series of little accidents. It's a pattern. And the pattern has a shape. Think about it. The fridge that runs all year. The 40 bottles that replace 2. The little and often shopping trip designed to keep you coming back. The hot water tank kept scalding around the clock. Every single one of these is the same trick played in a different room of your house. Take something people used to do for almost nothing, rapid inconvenience, plug it into a meter or a monthly bill, and turn a one-off bit of knowledge into a payment that never, ever stops. That's the real con, not any single product. The turning of self-reliance into dependence. For thousands of years, people knew how to keep food, clean a home, stay warm, and feed a family using what was around them and what was in their heads. And in the space of about 2 generations, roughly from the 1950s onward, that knowledge was quietly swapped out for a set of things you have to keep buying, keep powering, keep paying for, month after month, until the day you die. Nobody sat you down and told you the old way was gone. They just stopped teaching it. The advertisements filled the gap. The convenience felt like progress. And the knowledge that could have kept your money in your pocket slipped out of living memory, one funeral at a time, but some of it survived. It survived in tin sheds outside Dubbo, in the memories of blokes like Keith, in the yellowing pages of Country Women's Association handbooks, and in one particular invention out of the Western Australian goldfields that I promised you at the very start. And now I'm going to give it to you, because this is the one that proves everything I've said, and it's the one you can build this weekend for less than the cost of a takeaway dinner. Back in the 1890s, there was a gold rush at a place called Coolgardie, out in the harsh, dry, baking interior of Western Australia. Thousands of men poured into the desert chasing gold, and they had a serious problem. There was no ice. There was no refrigeration. That wouldn't come for decades. And in that heat, food spoiled in hours. Meat turned. Vegetables wilted. Men got sick from spoiled tucker in a place with no doctor for 100 miles. Now here's the part the history books gloss over. A contractor by the name of Arthur Patrick McCormick, working out there in the goldfields, noticed something simple. He noticed that a wet water bag hanging in the hot breeze stayed cold. Colder than the air around it. Much colder, and he understood why. As water evaporates, it takes heat with it. It pulls the warmth right out of whatever it's touching. It's the same reason you feel cold when you step out of the surf into the wind. So McCormick built a box, a simple wooden frame. He covered the sides with hessian, that coarse burlap cloth, and he stood the legs in trays of water. He ran strips of flannel or cloth from the water trays up over the hessian, so the water wicked up and kept the whole cloth wet. Then he put a tray of water on top and let it drip down the sides. The hot, dry desert wind blew through the wet hessian, the water evaporated, and the inside of that box stayed cold. Cold enough to keep meat, cold enough to keep milk sweet, cold enough to save lives. They called it the Coolgardie safe. And within a few years it wasn't just in the gold fields. It was in kitchens right across Australia, in the bush and in the towns, on the back veranda of nearly every home. My own grandmother had one. It ran on no electricity whatsoever. Its only fuel was water and a bit of moving air, and it kept her family's food safe through the hottest summers of the Depression, when they couldn't have dreamed of affording an electric refrigerator even if one had been for sale. Now here's why this is the secret that proves the whole thing. When electric refrigerators arrived and got cheap enough to sell to everyone, the Coolgardie safe didn't disappear because it stopped working. It worked beautifully. It disappeared because you can't put a meter on it. There's no monthly bill for a box that runs on a breeze. There's nothing to sell you once you've built one, and it lasts for decades. So it was quietly relabeled as primitive, as old-fashioned, as something poor people used to make do with, and it was pushed out of the kitchen and into the museum. Not because it failed, because it was too cheap to make anyone money. And you can build one this weekend, in a flat, on a balcony, in a laundry, anywhere with a bit of moving air. You need a small shelving unit or a simple wooden frame, some hessian or even old cotton towels, a tray of water at the bottom, a tray of water at the top, and strips of cloth to wick the water down the sides. Keep the cloth wet, keep it somewhere with a breeze or in front of an open window, and the inside will run cooler than your room, cool enough to keep your fruit, your vegetables, your eggs, your butter without a single watt of power. I built one. I keep my vegetables in it now instead of jamming them into the crisper drawer, and here's the thing that genuinely surprised me. They last longer in the Coolgardie safe than they did in the fridge, because the gentle humidity from the evaporating water stops them drying out, whereas a fridge sucks the moisture out of everything and turns your lettuce to rubber in 3 days. The old way didn't just match the fridge. For fresh produce, it beat it. Now, I'm not telling you to unplug your refrigerator tomorrow and throw it out the window. I'm telling you something more important than that. I'm telling you that the story you were sold, the story that says new is always better, that convenience is always progress, that the old ways were primitive and poor and best forgotten, that story is a sales pitch. And once you see it in the Coolgardie safe, you'll start seeing it everywhere, in your cleaning cupboard, at the checkout, on your power bill, in every corner of the home you thought you understood. Let me give you one more, because this is the one that ties the whole ribbon on it, and it comes straight from the same era and the same hard-won wisdom. The damper I mentioned earlier, the bread with no baker. The stockmen and drovers and swagmen who crossed this country on foot and horseback couldn't carry a bakery with them, so they carried flour. And when they wanted bread, they mixed flour with a bit of salt and water into a dough, right there in the camp, and they baked it in the coals of the fire in a cast-iron pot they called a camp oven. Flour, water, salt. That's it. That's bread. A loaf for a few cents. And you can make the same thing in your kitchen oven tonight. No yeast, no bread machine, no 4 minutes of skill required, for a fraction of what that supermarket loaf is bleeding out of you every week. The point of all of it, the fridge and the vinegar and the draft snake and the damper and the Coolgardie safe, is not that you have to live like it's 1890. The point is that you have a choice you didn't know you had. Every one of these skills was taken from you, not with a law or a ban, but with a quiet suggestion, repeated 10,000 times, that you're better off paying somebody else to do it for you. And every time you believe that suggestion, a little more of your money and a little more of your independence walked out the door. I believed it for most of my life. I paid for it for most of my life. And the day Keith handed me that glass of cold water in a tin shed with no power, I realized I'd been robbed, slowly, politely, for decades. of knowledge that was mine to begin with. Knowledge my own grandmother had and would have handed me, if anyone had thought it was worth keeping. So here's where I've landed, after all of it. You have not been failing at managing your money. You have been succeeding brilliantly at a game that was rigged, so the house always wins. The moment you stop playing it, the moment you take back even one of these old skills, the whole thing starts to unwind, and you feel something you probably haven't felt in years standing in your own kitchen. You feel like it's yours again. That's what this is really about. Not saving a few dollars, though you will. It's about being the kind of person who refuses to keep paying for the expensive version of a simple truth. The kind of person who looks at the humming box in the corner and the 40 bottles in the cupboard and asks the one question they trained us never to ask: do I actually need this, or was I just told I did? If that's you, if something in this stirred you up the way it stirred me up in that shed, then I want to hear from you. Here's my question, and I want a real answer in the comments. What's one thing your parents or your grandparents did around the house that you were taught to think was old-fashioned, but now you're wondering if they had it right all along? Was it a Coolgardie safe on the back veranda? A draft snake against the door? Bicarb and vinegar under the sink? Tell me what it was, and tell me where in this big country you're watching from, because I read every single one, and I want to know how far this old knowledge still reaches. And if you're done being sold the expensive version, if you want to stand with the people who are digging this stuff back up and refusing to let it die a second time, then follow along, because this is a movement now, not a channel. Next time I'm going to show you the forgotten way Australian families kept meat safe for months with no fridge and no freezer, using nothing but salt, and a technique that's been around since before this country had a single town on the map. Trust me, once you see how they did it, you'll never look at the meat aisle the same way again, because the truth was never lost. It was just buried under the convenient version, kept alive by a few old hands who never forgot, and now it's back in yours. Don't let anyone talk you into paying to forget it again. You made it right to the end, and that tells me you're my kind of person. Inside the Bush Wisdom Circle, I take you all the way through cold storage, the Coolgardie way, picking up right where we stopped. Ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. A real person, never a machine. You'd belong with thousands of practical folks like you. Just point your phone at the code. Cancel anytime. No risk.